This is a demonstration, a presentation of what is involved with Christianity, Christian faith, or Christian religion. Or what this is a Markov chain. Markov chains are particularly something that is associated with stochastic processes. Stochastic processes are this type of mathematical stochastic processes are this field of mathematics that deals with probability and mathematical models. It's quite complex. So in beginning to understand, this is an image which is a depiction of the Siege of Jerusalem, and this is an image which depicts St. Peter's denial of Christ, as they say. And so you have this highlight here on this cock crow. And so what the cock crow represents is perfect information. And in game theory, perfect information is a scenario where there is all parties or players have information related to the history of moves within the game. And so this cock crow, as it is illustrated, is, even though it seems as though it's a very insignificant thing, it's one of the most important things. And so in beginning to understand, you need to develop an understanding that Christianity didn't emerge from Jerusalem, it emerged from Greece. So what this depicts is the image on the left is the Great Fire of Rome, and the image on the right is the beheading of John the Baptist. And so what is typically understood, or people are indoctrinated with this belief that John was baptizing and then Jesus' disciples were baptizing. This is anachronism, and the topology and causality is identified within this story, or this reference, which is that Salome danced and then John was beheaded at her behest. But that's not necessarily that. If you reverse those if you reverse that, you'll be able to identify with causality. So it isn't that she danced and John was beheaded was that John was beheaded and then a dance ensued. And so the beheading of John the Baptist references the Great Fire of Rome. So the aristocracy was like so they became so interested in like their own future that they set a fire to Rome because they had this like idea of how to move forward, but they didn't have like the idea completely. They didn't understand completely what would occur, and so this relates back to the stochastic process. It's something that they weren't absolutely sure how it would turn out, but they were going to move forward anyway. So when it says John was baptizing, what is referenced is this militarism in Judea during the first century. This conflict between the Romans and the Jews at that time. Well, so this is just a basic map of the region, and what you need to understand is that Christianity did not emerge from Israel or Jerusalem because of this resurrection or this teacher or anything like that. Christianity emerged from Greece hundreds of years later due to these gospels that were written, and the gospels identify something of a they identify many things, but one of the most important things to understand is that they identify this probability distribution. In order to like get a better idea of the probability distribution, though, and you need to rearrange these two events, which are the Last Supper and the denial of St. Peter. And when you do that, you'll find out that these aren't nearly the same. The resurrection and the Last Supper, like what they represent, are nearly the same. So there's a bit more involved. So what the reference that is that there was this fire in Rome around 68 or 64. That reference is good for one thing, which is that it places Christians in Rome at that time, but there were no Christians in Rome at that time. Christianity was something that developed much later on. So there is this aspect of what is important there is that there's this data set that the Gospels identify, and that the cause and the effect are completely reversed. So there are these references of the coming of the Son of Man or the second coming, and these are events that are futurized that people are still waiting for. But these events, these are already occurred, and this timeline, which like gives this narrative of John was baptizing, the disciples were baptizing, those references identify various things, but most importantly, what they identify is this probability distribution, which again relates to the stochastic feature involved, being that Christianity emerged from Greece hundreds of years later, and not like because people were like, oh, this guy, he was feeding everybody and he made all these miracles. All those miracles are anachronism. So when you begin to understand that the Great Fire of Rome represents the beheading of John and the dance that ensued, you begin to develop another understanding, which is that the dance ensued and it culminated into walking on water. And so what walking on water represents is this something that is very interesting. So under the subheading of walking on water, there's baptizing and healing, and the representation or the personages or entities involved with this are John and the disciples and Jesus. And so as far as what that means, that baptizing represents militarism and healing represents imperialism, but it goes even further to involve rebuking demons. And so what that means, or what that represents, is essentially this biological mechanism. So during this like Jesus was walking on water. Well, Jesus was walking on water for like 1,700 years, or at least like 1,500 years, and during that period, there was this. In order to have like a biological mechanism, evolution or natural selection is a biological mechanism, and you need inner association. So this is where this quality of information asymmetry becomes involved, wherein um, this this imperial alliance has better information than this dissident alliance, and their conflict or this ongoing military chronic militarism for over a very long period um, resulted in the fulfillment of an objective. So their development of the circumstances related to this initiation of the stochastic process, which is military adventurism into chronic militarism. They determined that there was this fault in their initial plan, and that the dissident alliance would be the dissident alliance would possess this like advantage. And so this is like the old widow. She puts these two coins in. Well, what is referenced here is included in Mark, and so we're going with Mark in priority, in that Mark was the first gospel, Matthew, then Luke, then John, and so they realized that their strategy needed to improve. They needed to develop it, but they were going to move forward regardless. And so they reference this old widow here who has put more into the kingdom. Well, if you what needs to be analyzed is what needs to be taken into consideration is the payoffs in symmetric games in symmetric games, the payoffs are awarded according to like what a player puts in. So when a player exercises this strategy, the payoff is bears association to that strategy. And so when you come back to this, you see that the Imperial Alliance has maintained a structural fluidity, and they have they're John and the disciples. So their their structure is fluid. What is most important within this? This is like a abbreviated lesson here, but essentially some important things are that following this episode of Walking on Water, there's this transfiguration, and then there's this casting out of this demon, and then there's this reeling in of this fish. And what that identifies is that, first of all, this is in Matthew, so this is the second revision. This is like this revision right here is very similar to what is identified within the crucifixion. This is like crucifixion is kind of like this broad like this is like kind of how we could exercise some imperialism here. And what's important in that is that Christ is offered this crown of thorns, and then he's fitted with this crown of thorns, and then he is offered this sort of like poison or like painkiller or something. What those things represent, are the same thing. And so what this is some seed fell along the path, no. Some seed fell on rock, no. Some seed fell among thorns. So this is a deprivation of liberty, prohibition, fixed market. So within the crucifixion, there is a repetition of prohibition. And in that repetition, there is this type of, you could say that like the trajectory of democracy has been like put off. And so this sort of like adds to or provides more information on like how so the trajectory could be put off methodically. And essentially, so when you put it into the perspective of like payoffs within symmetric games, the fulfillment of the objective or a key objective, which is that which involves electronic funds transfer. It was essentially that the empire decided that or the aristocracy decided that electronic funds transfer was essential to their I'm not sure if you would say it was essential, but it is a property that is beneficial to empire. And I know that might sound a bit. We'll get to that part later. But essentially, the Roman economy had a very advanced banking system, and they transferred very large amounts of currency between banks, and then it got to the point where they didn't even move the coins anymore. They just made it like a ledger system, and from that, fiat currency was a development. And this here is sort of a proprietorship over fiat currency, wherein what is referenced here as this fish who is withdrawn with his coin in its mouth is an exercise of proprietorship over civility and fiat currency, in that essentially what the coin represents is turn the other cheek. It's like a in mechanism design, a game creator hopes to design a mechanism that implements some social choice function. So when is referenced as turning the other cheek, people will say that they follow like their uh, their teacher, the Redeemer, the Christ, but they don't do that. They're not doing that. That is a fallacy. They're actually what their behavior exhibits this quality that is more so that which is exhibited by Judas Iscariot. So they when it says turn the other cheek, it means turn them over to the authority, and that is something that is you can find in ancient Greece around 500 years before Christ in what is referenced as the duty of civil denunciation. What is important here is that we follow this course and identify that at this point here, following this very long episode of walking on water, there are various optimum outcomes, or a pair of optimum outcomes, let's say. And one of them is feeding the multitudes, wherein there is a fixed market. Essentially, this repetition of prohibition is suitable to develop the development of an oligopoly, and then in subsequent to oligopoly, there is the development of oligarchy. And so, again, like there is this very broad sense of like how how it could possibly develop, or what the outcome would be, in the sense of like whoever created this or put into effect this stochastic process. But again, the more information we have, the better chance we have of determining, or more so fixating on some sort of it's very complicated in that sense. Okay. What I want to focus on is that there is this image here. Okay, this is the Last Supper. So following the device's reification of modernity and electronic funds transfer, there is like this type of situation which is sort of identified here. It would have been nice, they say, if like we put together electronic funds transfer, and it was like a something that everyone was gung ho for. But it's more so that there is this reification involved, and it's a very long process, and this dissident alliance has it's best pictured here with this this woman, the Samaritan woman, who possesses this water jar. And so in the Last Supper, it's sort of like this scenario where, following the reification of the objective in walking on water, there is this, say we go from walking on water and then we end up here at the Last Supper. So once the objective has been fulfilled, and if everything is going well, and there hasn't been any exercise of strategy that is inadmissible to the device, so that's where I'm gonna kill this motherfucker with this goddamn weed blower. Sorry about that. Okay. What's important is that the scenario that is depicted in the Last Supper in the Synoptics is that which relates to an optimum outcome, but because of a dissident alliance's exercise of an inadmissible strategy, being that which is slavery, there is this sense that there needs to be this apocalyptic resolution, because this walking on water is like a very precise exercise of equilibrium, and when that precision is lost, or the precision is put to a volatility or compromised, there's this endgame that is completely different than the other. And so when it references, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, or whatever, inherit the thing. It's this probability distribution, which is over here, is from the Synoptics, and this probability distribution over here is from John. And the one in John is there's this reference to a disciple Jesus loved, and the reference to any depiction which references the disciple Jesus loved is within the most developed probability distribution. And so what is important here is that in the probability distribution, or within the depictions here that I have stated, this is the Last Supper, this is it's I'm not certain if oh, I need to use this pointer. Let's see. Okay, this is the Last Supper, this is St. Peter's denial, this is the crucifixion, this is the resurrection, and this is the disciple Jesus loved, like hopping off a boat. This is another reference to the disciple Jesus loved being like, he will exist until he returns. And this is another reference of the disciple Jesus loved, which is, all three of these are very closely related. But in this case, it doesn't reference it as the disciple Jesus loves. It references it as another disciple. And that's important because they're trying to conceal the probability distribution, which I have identified, which bears association to inheriting the kingdom of God. What this means is that if we get into, I need to get my pointer back. We get into here. What you can identify here is that following the fulfillment of an objective, which is that is satisfied by EFT, electronic funds transfers. There's a new modern financial system. However, what is involved with the crucifixion? So in the crucifixion, they put a crown on him, then they tear his garments, and so when they put a crown on him, it's like they offer him prohibition. So you go back to prohibition, and then you find out that we got rid of 600 billion hours worth of slave labor for whatever industrial capabilities that we had within a sense of mechanizations that facilitated our ability to be an important role outside of militarism within the economy. That wealth or that value we cast aside for some gin that somebody's grandpa made in a bathtub, and that what that means is that, or what I'm trying to get at is that with the fulfillment of the objective being that which is substantiated as electronic funds transfer and a global financial system, and a private prison industry, this fish here is very important because it says, give this to them for your tax and mine. So give this coin to them for your tax and mine. And so our European friends over there are profiting off of the trafficking and confining of our former slaves. So every time we send one of our former slaves over to the pen, somebody in as you say, you're paying your taxes to give some buddy over in Europe a chance to play. I don't know about that. Okay, so obviously that's a problem, and just that identifying with that itself in court of law would be. I'm not sure that that's gonna be fun. So the device is out of sync, and it's due to this exercise of a strategy that is inadmissible. So there are two things that are referenced in the Gospels, which are, do not put a new patch on an old piece of cloth, and do not put new wine into old wineskins, or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact details. Essentially, what the new wineskin thing references is that at some point within this militarism and chronic militarism, the militarism has to stop, and so you can't put new wine into old wineskins. You have to stop at some point, and you can never ever have slaves. So because slavery was a choice, the device is on this other course. So what that means is that there is an apocalyptic resolution. And the apocalyptic resolution, it's best to identify this here because, let's see. Yeah, in the sense of this, in the synoptic versions, these two, the Last Supper and the resurrection, they're essentially the same. They're very close. There's maybe a few small details in the sense of the outcome that they represent, what the difference is. But in the non-synoptic version, there's quite a big difference in between what is referenced as the Last Supper. In the non-synoptic version, the Last Supper represents what is identified by game theory as a Nash equilibrium, and the Nash equilibrium first shows up in the book of Luke as this episode between this good Samaritan and this neighbor who knocks on the door at midnight. And essentially, within Nash equilibrium, the game has reached a point that neither player can advance by changing only their own strategy, and they have to change this, sort of compel or influence the other player to change their strategy. And so for quite a long time during this walking on water phase, the dissident alliances had maintained this sort of non-confrontational isolationist approach to this militarism that they were faced with, and imperialism and the exercise of hegemony and so forth. And so they're constantly being dispersed, and within this process of their dispersal, they have adapted the strategy of changing their money, or changing the way their currency is valued, and so when it references turning the tables on the money changers, it's like the money changers are this dissident alliance who has essentially they've used gold, they've used silver, they've used salt, they've used child support, whatever it is to valuate their money, or the value of their currency. And then through this process, or I want to get back to in the initial outline, changing the money or turning the tables on the money changers was it was included. It was a prospect that the money changers needed to have their tables turned on them. However, it wasn't quite certain how they were going to do that. And so that development, or that process, is outlined in here, which identifies a Nash equilibrium. This is important because when we go back to the crucifixion again, I said there was this he was crowned, and then he was offered the poison, or the wine, or whatever, some sort of painkiller, and so there's like this repetition. There's a repetition in prohibition, according to what game theory would identify as a strategy set. And in here, we find that there is a man who has been robbed and beaten, and then some good Samaritan comes by and offers him some wine on his wounds. And so again, they have repetition because he's beaten, and then there is he's given wine on his wounds, and so in the Gospels, the wine consistently represents militarism. So within that repetition and this repetition that is within this crucifixion, you get there's militarism followed by militarism and prohibition followed by prohibition, and that is how essentially like the main methodology involved with influencing the trajectory of the democratic state. And so what this represents here, this Good Samaritan and this friend at midnight who needs to borrow 3 loaves is you could sum it up as within the game, if we're talking about game theory, the exercise of militarism, it reached a point where they couldn't go any further. They couldn't advance any further by with militarism. The Principal Alliance couldn't make any gains with more militarism, so it became their objective due to the inability of the device to amalgamate on the fulfillment of objective of electronic funds transfer due to the exercise of strategy that is inadmissible to the device. It has become the objective, or became the objective, which is outlined within Luke, to tarnish the Dissidents Alliance reputation by compelling them or influencing them or putting them on a trajectory to get a little involved in some militarism themselves, which is what breaks that do not put new wine into old wineskins, or whatever that is. You can't practice militarism beyond a certain point because the device isn't suitable for that purpose after the fulfillment of the objective. So if the optimum outcome was the optimum outcome was I guess you could say admissible, but I mean, if the optimum outcome was available, I guess you could say, if the optimum outcome was available, then it would be, in a sense, this like Last Supper prototype, wherein with the fulfillment of an objective being that of electronic funds transfer, there would be some sort of like imperial pursuit worldwide to sort of catalyze beyond, or catalyze outliers. So the exercise of this Nash equilibrium is that wherein a prohibition is followed by a forced relinquishing of mechanizations necessary to garment textiles manufacturing. And then what that is in economic terms is this these high yield gains from prohibition that are short term, which are focused into the reestablishing garment textiles manufacturing into some other developing nation wherein labor is inexpensive, and so it's like short-term high yield gains for these long-term gains. That's what the exchange is, and that is referenced as some seed was cast among thorns, some seeds sprouted forth, but then when the sun came up, the seeds were diminished, and so you go from prohibition to relinquishing of garment textiles manufacturing to returning that investment into this. It's not something that like is very like colloquially easy to describe, but when you get like a second prohibition involved, and then you get an investment from the foreign yields from garment textiles manufacturing, you invest that back into a private prison industry, and then you develop proprietorship over civility with this turn the other cheek idea, and then you return those yields into this medical insurance creditors association, and you return those yields into the military industrial complex, and you'll find that there's this probability that there could be a probability there that somehow you might get airplanes running into buildings. Okay. So, what we need to focus on then is that in the Last Supper, that is within the non-synoptic is like this. It's quite a bit different than the synoptic because there isn't this jar. There isn't this in the synoptics. It starts out, go find this man who has is carrying a pitcher of water and tell him to prepare a room upstairs for us. In the synoptics, there isn't a pitcher of water in the room upstairs. The pitcher of water is possessed by this Samaritan woman. So when we come into this aspect of incomplete information, when we're dealing with imperfect information, we're dealing with information that or related to a history of moves in the game, and when we're dealing with incomplete information, we're dealing with possible outcomes related to exercising certain strategies. So what is involved here if you look at this very left here, we find that there's this, let's highlight this. This is a guy who's had his eyes spit in, and then he's immediately told to take a bath, to get in some water. Now, this is in reverse, by the way. So what I'm taking you through is this strategy set that goes in reverse from the Last Supper in the non-synoptic John to this woman who is compelled to put down her pitcher of water, which the pitcher of water represents the, in economic terms, they call it the global reserve currency. So he's immediately told to take a bath, so we can identify this as like a couple bailouts related to the COVID situation. We'll call it 2 trill on COVID. This thing's weak. I'm annoyed with that. Okay, so essentially, what I want to speed up. This is only like a guessrehearsal. Essentially, these are in reverse. So this guy has his eye spit in, and he is cured of his blindness, and he's immediately told to get in the bath. So the important part here is that he has had his eye spit in, which is a type of way of saying like, yeah, sure, that's a good cure, but what is involved is what is more important is that he gets in the bath, and then in reverse, mechanically, the next step is this guy here who has he's been sitting by the lake or the waters here where everybody else is jumping in. He's been sitting there for 38 years and he cannot get in. And so what that means is like you have an episode of bailout here, and then you have 38 years or so, 2 generations of no bailout. And during that time, inflation goes up so much that you're compelled to set down your pitcher of water. And that's essentially how the resolution of this is. That's how it's going. What happened? Okay. So again, important that this pitcher of water in the non-synoptic is not there. It's being held by the Samaritan woman. And so all this is like this strategy set here is sort of like hinted at within the 10 virgins and turning the table on the money changers. But what's important here is, so this is the Nash equilibrium, and it's wherein the dissident alliance was influenced to turn to militarism, as I described, through prohibition, garment textiles manufacturing, relinquishing those elements of mechanizations, then reestablishing those in another market, and returning with those yields into a prison confinement industry with another prohibition, investing that in a medical creditors insurance, and then making it so that you have to have insurance, otherwise your medical bills are 5 times more than if you didn't have insurance, and then investing those yields into a military industrial complex, and then we know what happens, or we get a sense of what happened there. And so then backwards canonicity from the non-synoptic Last Supper, we find that there is this woman who has sinned no more. And so this is sort of like saying, okay, we got you to do a little militarism, but we don't want you to like go full empire on us. Don't do that. You got to kind of be like a little wuss here. And so what we see is that like it says he marked a line on the ground. Okay, let's have a look at this, because I said before that spitting in the eye, that isn't necessarily like the best kind of cure. So let's have a look at what could happen with drawing a line on the ground, because it appears as though we may be being called a chicken, or we may be being hypnotized by this wokeness. Not sure. Not sure if you would call it that, but that's pretty interesting. And I'm pretty sure if chickens are doing that now, they sure as hell were doing that 2,000 years ago. I don't think chickens have changed that much. So we get back to this spitting in the eye, and then taking a bath, and then unable to get in the water, and uh, putting down her water jar, and you look it up. Look up the Samaritan woman. As soon as she puts down her water jar, Jesus' disciples comes back. They as soon as you get rid of uh, as soon as you turn back to qualifying your dollar by some other standard, gold or silver or baby's diapers or baby's formula, or as soon as you do that, the European alliance will become so strong and so powerful. Their alliance, it says, she puts down the bottom the pitcher of water, and all of a sudden all the disciples show up. Look it up. And so there's this potential for some type of apocalypse. And the reason why the apocalyptic ending or apocalyptic resolution is necessary is because egalitarianism in the administration of justice who is that for real? We're really all equals here? Wait a minute, hold on a sec. Let me get this straight. We're all equals. When did that start? We're okay. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty I'm gonna go with this equilibrium here. The equilibrium here doesn't allow you to just be like, oh, you know what? We just need some slaves for a while, and guess what? Now you're all free. We're all equals. Hey, that's cool. I'm pretty sure it's a bit more complicated than that. Um, so essentially, what that means is that there is this apocalyptic resolution. Sorry, there's a bug in here. And the apocalyptic resolution is essentially the deification. All of this relates back to the deification of Josephus, Flavius, Vespasian Flavius, my bad. Vespasian Flavius and his son Titus. So when it's like the coming of the Son of Man, the coming of the Son of Man is when Titus sieged Jerusalem. The reason they don't call it the coming of the Son of Man is because they don't want you talking about it. It'll be the coming of the Son of God once you figure it out. So the reason why the apocalypse is necessary is because, in a sense, the the means involved, or the militarism and the biological mechanism that developed into modernity, in a sense that, like, if you go with a parallel to the Romans wanted to deify this Flavius guy to make him like the incarnation of God on Earth. Like this is like the the thing that made everything. He's now here in our city, and when so if you follow the God put them into the garden, and then they were bad, and he kicked them out of the garden. Well, God put you into a modern financial system, and now God's going to take you out of that because you didn't do it right. And that's why you got to have the year apocalypse. after the apocalypse will be like, oh man, that guy was good.